Hey guys, I'm just working on my cinematic scene, so I thought I'd show you how I'm going to go about that. I'm going to have two characters fight. I haven't put together an animatic yet, but it's going to be a beach and a boat. First guy jumps off. Since I have two character models, I'm going to have them fight each other. I'll do some fog clouds with a full moon. Right, and go through the story to meet the other character and have them engage before the fight. Right now I've got a Cinemachine brain on my main camera. I also have a timeline object, and you can see I have two virtual cameras in my scene made after installing the Cinemachine plugin, what do you call it, package in the package manager. So I can always make new Cinemachine cameras. What I typically do with these is I'll use the scene view to navigate to my character or whatever I want to show. Select the new virtual camera and then use the align with view to move that new camera into that spot. So that shortcut on PC, Ctrl Shift F. Now my timeline object is just an empty game object in my scene, right, with a playable director on it. It doesn't need an animator on it. Not sure where that came from. And then I need the timeline window open here, right, which is under sequencing, timeline. I dock that at the bottom next to my project window is my preference. And then I add my main camera, right, I can just drag that onto the timeline there. That's going to create its own horizontal path, right? Or just activation track or animation track. Then you're going to place your virtual cameras on this timeline to swap between them in the scene. So if I have a second virtual camera, I can drag that onto the timeline. If I'm looking through my game view on the timeline, when that switch occurs on the timeline, right, that's when the camera cuts in the scene. Right, you can see that happening. What it's doing is the main camera is popping into these different virtual camera spots. So as I go through my scene, right, I've already decided my camera angles here. I still need to do some assembly before I kind of just start placing cameras all over the place. I don't want to overwhelm myself with too many things to juggle right away. I'm going to have a full moon in my scene, so I'll give this guy a texture later. Maybe he can be my stand-in full moon. And I'm not sure if I have a boat somewhere, but definitely gonna need some assets or some stand-in assets for this scene. Not to mention the other character, my troll character. A fresher texture on this guy, maybe if I have one, and a terrain. So right away I just need to create 3D object terrain. It's going to create this huge plane that goes off into space. Right. If you check in the terrain settings, you can check the size. Default is 1000 by 1000. And what I typically do is move this into these negative values, X and Z, negative 500. So my character is in the center. Now if you're using water, as I am, I have a water shader in my scene. The timeline will need to go below the water and then raised up with the raise or lower terrain in the areas that are not wet, right? So this is too strong. Lower the opacity. Get a softer brush. So let's see if this is my guy in the middle of the scene. He's kind of doing a beach assault gone wrong. It's going to be like an army of goblins up here on the beach. So I can use pretty soft terrain brushes, right? If I want to do a more rocky terrain, I can use some of these sharper brushes. It's good to have a mix of both. I would still need to raise up all this terrain until I reach my character level, sort of. But I'll also just look at moving my character over. It's good to have hills on the edge of the terrain as well, just to raise kind of everything on the edge so that there's never a flat horizon off in the distance. It always feels like there might be something over the next hill. Right, and again, swapping between brushes is going to help get some much needed variation, and especially between differing terrain types, right? Maybe I could say, okay, the ground gets a little more rocky at the top of the beach, but we keep using like the soft brush to raise up the bottom layer. Obviously, it looks like my brush is quite small when I'm brushing things, but it's it's pretty massive, so it's good to check the character scale, I guess, every once in a while. Alrighty, so let's check where he's at. Let's keep him at 0, 0. Let's see if this makes sense. So for my story, I need this to be a bit lower, so using shift click to lower the terrain here. This area can come up a bit. I'm also going to have a strong fog effect going on. It's pretty nice. This moon I'll just need for one shot, but I might use a HDRI image there. Now, I also want to have the fog from standard images or standard assets. Unfortunately, I don't have it in my package here. Starter assets, no, standard assets, here we go. So what we used for the car racing game has some good assets inside of it, including terrain textures, but what I'm after is the particle effects. Now, the problem is that there's a lot of scripts that need to be present, so let's see if I can tag the ones that I need. I was looking for. Oh, this is the one that's tricky. Okay. So I deleted that file causing the error, and I found the prefab that I want in the particles, which is dust storm. Let's see if it will run. Okay, so now I'm going to mess with that particle effect for a while. Put it at the bottom so I can find it. Right away, just like crank up some numbers here. Emission. Okay, the rotation and everything looks fine. Now, one issue here is that you don't want to necessarily just explode it, or maybe you do, right? Like you can widen the area of effect, covering as much as like your whole terrain in one big old super cloud. But then I'm gonna just need to also have really high emission and max particle rates. Right now I'm like, gotta be a little bit careful. Maybe not, maybe 10 times. Let's see if it can handle it. And I want it to be even more dense, right? So it's like I gotta keep dialing up these numbers. There's the tint, so I want to get rid of any color on there. I'm also gonna make this a night scene, so I can grab the directional light, maybe make it twilighty. I could also start making maybe a material for this moon. Dang, I have this third-person controller in here, and I don't really need it. So material can just be white. And turn on emission. Let's see what the lights look like. Also got the ocean. Okay. problem with the ocean shader is that you can't see it in the scene view. So I didn't realize that my terrain had a big hole in the beach. Alright, so let's get my timeline object and lock that in so that this stops disappearing. My VCam 2 still shows there even though I deleted it, so now I need to start thinking about my shots and my animation and so on. So typically I might work with some stand-in pieces while, like, before I bring in my my real character model and things, just so that I can stay in this sort of creative mode where I'm putting things together. So I want to test things out, like, okay, if I've got a virtual camera that's over the shoulder here, and I make that new one the first shot. See how it looks with the fog. So I need to pre-warm this fog effect, and it's still not thick enough to cover him. So this is often why it's a bit risky to make just like one huge fog piece, right? Like, or one huge dust storm particle. It's sometimes better to localize things. Oh no, I must be careful about scaling it unevenly. And I want to tick pre-warm here so that it starts. It's too far. I think that's my sphere causing that weird shader bug. So next I should go to HDRI Haven and maybe sort out my Skybox, just because I want to capture this nighttime look and it's not really working yet. Alright, so in HDRI Haven they have a whole section for night shots. I'm gonna have it be quite dark on the beach, but it's worth sometimes just testing these. This has got too many lights in it for me. I think I've used some of these before as well. Let's see. Some more Milky Way. Here's my full moon one, so maybe we'll try full moon. I'll just import that EXR file into the project. Alright, so there's that EXR file. Let's see. Anything I need to change there? It looks alright. Now, this one has not worked out yet, so let's see. We change this to a skybox with a panoramic texture. Drag the HDR onto here. Double-sided, we don't need double-sided. Now, all of these have different settings, so it's a bit tricky to sometimes find where the skybox setting is. But you can add the component and then the material. It won't show up in the scene view, unfortunately, but it will be visible in the game view. So here you can see the top of that is actually from the skybox texture. And it's also a problem here, obviously, because it's above the horizon. And it doesn't, I'm still getting errors on this. Maybe this from, no, the fog is no longer over the water, so it might just be the directional light angle. Like the ocean shader might be dependent on the light angle. No. Oh, no, it's that plane that I made. I'm an idiot. Okay. It's just so I can see the terrain. Now, let's see if we can mess with that skybox. So we don't want the golf course out in the ocean. Not sure if it'll let us. Let's see what this looks like. So maybe that one not working so well. Gonna have some other little goblins behind him, but I want them to be a bit smaller. Maybe they can just be slightly smaller. And these might later just be 2D objects. I might just make like a drawing of the little army back here. the main effect that I wanted from like the line of goblins is kind of like the red eyes and the darkness and the seeming of like overwhelming odds. Other stuff I can do is paint the terrain. Right. Well, first I still want to fix this one little area. That's where I need my ocean back. Kind of wanted more distance between them, but it should work. Oops. Alright, so let's add some texture to our terrain. Create a layer. Grass Hill Albedo. Double click it. It's going to apply it to the whole terrain. Keep making new ones. Grass Rocky. Obviously I'm going to want sand, and that is one of my options. Since I'm on the beach. Beach. Oh, we want to make sure the opacity is up. Okay. Could also add trees to the map. It's going to ask for the prefab. There's a palm tree in the standard assets, so I'll use those. Some on the beach. These settings are really aggressive by default. I don't know. You also have to test the height of these things. Sometimes they're tiny or huge. Change the height. Pretty cool. Still too dense. I like having more variation in the height. use grass, but it is a nice touch as well. It's also quite aggressive in its opacity. Definitely a nice effect for the up close shots. Maybe a bit large. So, I wonder if I edit it after the fact. Yep. Since all these guys are in the way now, I'm just gonna make a game object above them. Now, usually it can be an option there, but it's fine. Just move them into it. Didn't mean to all caps it, but there we go. Main camera, yeah. Also seen people use the dust storm as some clouds overhead. And since I wanted to do like a moonlight scene, I want to try get one shot like looking up at the moon through the clouds. Now, definitely want to mess with the settings though, right? So that it doesn't resemble the other one so much. getting somewhere. Don't want the rotation to be so pronounced. Seems like the same. Alright, so I just read that I can offset the texture here just so that I don't get the bottom of it. So let's see if that will work. If I just crop out the whole horizon, is that what I need? No. Probably about there should be fine. Looks like no trees. Sand is the wrong color, but sky looks okay. I might want to get rid of this directional light completely. It might be messing with the skybox lighting. The plane. And the other thing I forgot to enable in the fog is for it to collide with the terrain. These are clouds. fog, a little bit of gravity. Alright, we'll help it sink to the ground, but then the real trick is to add collision. Where's that little box? There. It's gonna recalculate it. I should have stopped the simulation, I guess, first. Might have killed Unity. Let's see. Alright, so it's struggling, but it didn't crash. Tick, 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 tick. So maybe should add a bit of tint back into this texture because it's lacking something. Oh, I'm actually editing the particle, which is a problem because now the clouds are also brown. Let's see if it looks okay though. Oof. Runs like garbage. But it does make cool effects here on the ground, so. Typically, you know, if I get that level of slowdown, I need to go into the particles and just lower. Well, I can also turn off the clouds to help it a bit, but it is the fog causing the slowdown, so I want to decrease its overall size and the number of particles that it's having to calculate. Come on, buddy. Got it. So the rate come down. How big is the area? Still way bigger than I can see. Now I must also make sure it's not. Collides with. So I can just tell it to only collide with the terrain. That's going to help it out a little bit. Okay. Fog. Collision. Collides with terrain. Alright, because it might have been trying to collide with the trees and driving itself a bit batty. It's doing some weird stuff. I wonder if this is just. Let's have it here. animation. Huh. Because it has to collide with everything? Hmm. This is what I forgot to mess with in Lifetime. This keeps one particle around for longer. Okay, good, good, good. It's more like it. Let's swap these around. And then maybe look at what other shots I've got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so 16 shots altogether. I could also think about bringing my characters onto the timeline. I've added my troll in. Right, so if I add an animation track for him, can also give him his sword. Now, another thing that I typically do for a weapon is have an in-between object to kind of dock the weapon in. So I'll create an empty object that puts it in the exact same location as the pivot of the sword. Then I'll swap their parenting. I will fully expand the skeleton just for this part so I can find the right hand, middle finger, which is where I typically attach the the weapon object. Punk. Alright, so now anytime the troll moves, that sword is going to be parented to his hand. Then I should have to make sure. Okay, so I haven't changed this guy to a humanoid rig, maybe. Okay, I'd have changed him, so I just need to double check that. And now if I have animations, right, I can start to add them also by changing them to humanoid. So I've imported a bunch of animations, not all of them are set to humanoid yet. Then I prefer having these animation files just by themselves rather than having these big old FBX files which have all this extra data in them, when all I need is this little animation file in here. So typically I'm going to copy the name of that animation, go to the little triangle icon inside of it, Control D, pops it out, makes a duplicate, and then I paste in that animation name. Find that expanded greatsword FBX, and I can delete that FBX. I can put the animation onto my timeline. Okay, so he's got an animation on him. Oops. So I've got to use the offset modifier here, sorry, to get him where I want to start. I'm also doing the wrong thing by not picking an idle for this first animation. So melee combo. Can use control mouse down to look for an idle animation. Again, I'll pull the animation file out of there. Delete the FBX. Greatsword idle. Move him into place. Is it too big? I don't know. Giant swords, it's hard to tell. So, if I have one character idle for a long time or not really, in the shot, then I don't really need to have anything on their timeline. Whereas, like, I'm going to be starting with this Viking character. I don't think this is the correct character model though, so let me swap him out. It's something going on with the skin texture. Now, in this character's case, oh, looks like that's the wrong one. Skin. That's the problem with splitting up your object into multiple sub-objects, right? Like this armor. So when you want to reapply it, it's a bit of a pain. You could also apply it through the inspector window, I suppose. But I had better luck with this skin texture here. I have to swap that out later. This guy had an axe on him. It is just, I can just pull it out there. The same thing here for the right hand. Oops, this is the troll. So this axe is sitting on the spine, not on the... I don't know if I made a mechanism for this axe to attach. Kind of looks like it could go there. Attach this to the spine. These stupid things weren't working last I checked. Oh, I can't delete it. Okay. Animation track. Yeah, we don't need the spin jump. Okay, so this is going to be my jump. So I got some skin problems also with this version. I'll have to watch out for that. Also need to set the offset. Looks like this camera got attached, so these are perspective cameras from another scene. It's annoying. Okay. The other thing not to do, right, is to put your characters on an uneven surface. Can really be annoying to track with animations. Especially when, you know, since we're using tacked on animation here, we're not actually walking this character across with gravity and everything else enabled. So in that case, I might be forced to actually flatten some of these areas out. Now, let's set height. Looks like this could be one way. 32. So I might make it a little bit easier for my character to walk around than to stick at a flat height. But I think it might just be smooth height that I'm looking for. Used to be part of the raised terrain tool. That's a nicer jump. So now, right, my character will disappear if I have two animations here until I tell it to match the offsets. Then it'll go back to the same zeroing spot. I should be able to just delete the old one now and use this as my primary, right? Again, I might need to offset it. The other thing I can think of doing is to do an override track for this change in elevation that I'm going to have. This is because he's going to be jumping off of a ship, which will be represented by the box. There. So he'll jump from there to the bottom. So if I want to override this track, let's see, I'm gonna hit record. Let's see if it's working with the offset tool. Okay. Oh, here it is. Okay, so now it's set the keyframe up there. Let's also scooch this over, get it to the right place. Have to be careful because root motion gets messed up by the override track. So this is well, I haven't used this override a whole lot. It's touchy about where the feet are going to go. Let's see if we set it down to the ground, if it can tween that motion. Yeah, so again, the override just has some weird bits that aren't smoothed out. They're definitely worthy of called bugs. So I try to find the most extreme poses and then correct there. Looks like I used to get there a little earlier. Also have to be careful of putting frames too close together, because when I play this back, it's gonna get kind of choppy. So because of this override nonsense, I might even have a second character, or second version of this character, right? Like I could just copy him and have another track for a second character that I bring in to complete. But let's see what it looks like. Bonk. Okay, so he pulls off the jump. Oops. Because there's no way to, I don't think, to stop it right after. So if I add another animation down here, right, now I have to animate them using the override. It's like I can't just, the depend on the motion. So main loss, I guess, is just the foot placement. That's, I find, what the most annoying. So I've got the battle cry at the end. These things I have fixed in another version. So easier if I have these as full screen, so I can just tap through them and look at them instead of my VCams this way. So I've got a few wide shots. I've got a reverse shot on Mr. Barb here. Got a shot of the moon, which unfortunately I can't see exactly where it is, but hopefully up there. And then I'm just, oh, that's interesting, control and mouse wheel down, but I just want to mouse wheel down to see more of the timeline. If I want cameras to cut, right, like film cuts, they're next to each other. If I want them to blend between the position, right, they overlap. Oh, I almost hit the moon. Hey guys, so I've been working on my project more. I thought I would show you some progress, right, and some tricks that I figured out, or some bugs that you might run into. You know, like I mentioned, you guys probably ran into a lot of these Cinemachine tricks last semester, but hopefully you've remembered how to solve them. So one thing that I've done here is I've added an override track for this jump animation so that he'll jump from one height to another height. By itself, if I just show this animation separately, let's see if it'll show it. Right, by itself, this animation stays in place, or it jumps. He jumps up and forward. So what I've done is I've added an override track in order to change the height value, right? So that now he's got frames here for where he's staying still. Right, I've had to rekey his feet a little bit, and unfortunately doesn't do great things with his head when his helmet's freaking out a little bit there on this animation, so I'll have to hide that in my shot, which looks like I have already. So I've keyframed all these different heights into the jump, and I've also had to key additional ones after he lands just to keep the feet from sliding to the ground too much. Right, because the issue with an override track now is that you no longer have that root motion that looks really nice. So what I'm probably gonna try to do with this, if I can't do anything else, or if I can't get around it, is I'm going to just duplicate the Viking character. Right, I have two characters in my scene just because all three now, because I have them. So I decided to use them. Now the problem is, for my other animations here, like the idle animation, that override track will continue to break the feet even though it's not really playing. So I just noticed this one attribute, or one menu choice that said convert into a clip track, right, which is now gotten rid of those keyframes and hidden them inside of a recording here, which is kind of an interesting take on things. I'm not sure if it gave itself a name or it put itself anywhere. Okay, so it did make an asset for it, but it's inside the timeline as an animation called recorded. It must be on this timeline object that I have here. Interesting. So let's see if that changes anything. It looks like the feet are still having issues, or are they? Yeah, the feet are no longer locked on the spot, right? So if that's the case, what I might do is swap out this model for a duplicate, or maybe I can just duplicate them completely. That does some things. The only issue is, right, you can't have two timeline horizontal bars, right, on the same object. So I'll also need to have a duplicate of him in the scene. And then the second animator line is going to animate the second guy. So actually, they should be right on top of each other. And if I remove this override track, I remove the jump. Let's see where. Now I have to think about getting this guy out of the way. Don't need all that other stuff on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the can I just do this? The offsets to move him. Or then override. Oh, doesn't like that. So let's just maybe look at an activation track. Let's see if we can do it right on the number here. And the second object is going to be active after this one disappears. Okay, there's the disappearing act. So now the issue is that the offsets are incorrect. And I have to just move him back into place where he was. Ideally while he's off camera, right? I don't want to do this while he's in frame. Tick tock, tick tock. So maybe I could check his location here, position. 1.4 and 27.8. Is it the same? No. Next thing I want to review is the activation track of, because one of my favorite animations is this animation where they pull the sword off their back, right? It's a nice one. Just to get the mood started. I'm going to pull my sword out. Now I probably want another like 10 or 15 more goblins here in the background. This is also just one goblin model, obviously, that I got working, right? He sits in the scene, and then I just duplicated him a few times. Then I gave each of them tracks on the animator, right? And they each have a separate idle animation that they're just looping through. Now with you guys, hopefully your storyboard plan was just focused around one character, because now things are starting to get pretty busy, because I don't actually have 3 characters right now. I've got 5 characters in the scene. Other stuff that I want to add, it's like this boat. So if you have, oh, that's interesting. Okay, so I have to hit the lock key to go back to the animation window. If you have an object in your scene that you want to animate, you can animate it using the animation window from window animation, right? Different to the animator. Say I want to have this boat like come in and land on the beach, right? That's kind of the animation that I want. But I also want the ability to mess with it on the timeline, right? Then I just create a new clip here. Boat land on the beach. I can put it in my animations folder. And then I can just use the record function to set a keyframe at the start, right? And a keyframe of where I want it to end up. So now I can add this object onto my timeline and import this animation onto the timeline. So all I need to do is remind myself where the boat is. Also to lock my timeline again. There's the boat. So this will get its own animation track. And then I can do add from clip, boat lands on the beach. And now I can determine where in my scene this is going to happen, right? So this is actually going to be my first shot. It's not quite long enough, so... Oh, it's because there are offsets involved, so let me make sure that it lands in the right spot with the offsets. Because it's not high enough now. So check my offsets. And this is actually going to push everything else in my scene back. So let's see if I can grab everything. And I suppose increase the length of that active. Does he land? Oh, it looks like he lands first. And then I'm also going to need something to drive that Viking around, so he actually moves on the ship. So should also be able to do that in the override track, but it's been acting up a little bit today. I'm not sure what I did to it. I was trying some different things on it. So I have a second override track. And I select my guy. Oh. Okay. It still doesn't want to let me move him. this. No, they have to be together. So I should check my storyboard to see where I was at. I save that into my assets folder. So here, this scene was more over the shoulder. Oops. Wow, that jump animation, it's really got a nasty issue with the neck. Now, if that's the case, what I could do, right, is try edit that animation here in Unity. So this is mutant jump attack. If I double click it, I can see all the keyframes and all the things that it is animating. So all I need to do is look for the neck, right? I guess these are the Unity names for the different parts. Neck turn down right, neck tilt, neck nod. Is that the only version of that? I knew it. There's two. Okay, so which one do I have? There it is. So neck tilt. You can mess with the neck tilt. And if, since it's got like probably a zillion keyframes on here, right, what I would probably want to do is just grab all the keyframes on that line, and I could just start it over, but it looks like I need to leave at least one there for it to keep the line. Oh, that's creepy. That's the left, right. Okay, so it's on the wrong line. There it is. So all these keyframes, see, are wrong. We need it almost basically zeroed out. Looks like it looks right. looks like if I change it, it does add a keyframe, but it's not tweening. So unfortunately, his beard clips through the helm quite a lot. Oh, that's a fun shot of the moon. So I could also mess with the hand, right, if the weapon is clipping into his face. Really wish that beard wouldn't clip so bad. I might have to go in and mess with the skin weights here soon. And then while I'm here, let's look at the axe as an activation object. Just turn that inactive. Oops, these guys are gonna need the match offsets to previous. And then here, what I want to do is start adding some more clips. And then mess with the animation or the activation track so that it clicks right on where I need it. So this. Right there. Oh, interesting. So now I have two two Vikings to juggle. Let me make sure I guess as long as I can see him that it's the right one. So this is the axe that's gonna disappear. And I have not duplicated the other axe, I suppose. Oh, I might have lost some work there. Oh, here it is. Axe handle on back. So the issue now is that I need this axe to be right where this other one is going to disappear. Which is awkward, because it's not a, doesn't make a lot of sense on the back. So if I need something exactly in the same place, I might as well just duplicate one. And then reparent where it is attached to. Give this guy an activation track. Okay. Oh, equip over back. Okay, so it should happen right here. move the troll stuff over. And give Mr. Viking another thing to do. It's probably just going to be idle. I think that's crouched idle. So my X disappears. And I don't really have any shots beyond this yet. I was kind of gonna have some back and forth between them. So maybe my next goal, I think, is gonna be to grab a music track, right? To add in a little bit of mood and tension in here, and to give me a little bit more inspiration for the timing of things, right? Since I didn't finish my animatic and do it properly. Bonk. Oh, that's an old weird one. So this kind of gets me to that point where we're at last semester, right? Like where we're thinking of a cinematic leading up to a boss fight, like right before the boss fight actually occurs. But I do want to spend more time on this, and hopefully that'll lead to an actual fight. I also want to play with the graphic settings until I get it looking like a night scene, right, without so much distracting crap in the background and the foreground and things with like the fog. The fog should be there, but it shouldn't be noticeable, right? It shouldn't. Nothing should necessarily steal the show from the character, right? So if you've got like a water shader that's a bit over the top, or an outside asset that's going to make the rest of your stuff look bad, then you don't want to necessarily include that stuff. I also wanted the troll's little goblin, glowing eyes to be really visible. So I need to figure out how to get that to work with the fog as well. Now, other stuff that you can see on my timeline, right, are my virtual cameras. Hopefully that makes sense what's going on in here, right? That I've just, whenever I need a new shot, I just need to make a virtual camera in my scene. Say I want one of the back of the trolls here. It's a bit much for this case. So create virtual camera, align with view, Control Shift F is the shortcut. I have my gizmos turned off. So that gives me a virtual camera that I can then place on the timeline. Like so. And if I overlap cameras, right, it'll add some animation between those two areas. But you don't want to become reliant on that unless it's very purposefully done, right? Like in small cases like here, I move from like a side shot to an over the shoulder shot. Right? Side shot, over the shoulder a little bit. I don't want to be like swinging all the way around the camera from like a shot of the front, like all the way around to the shot of the back, right? Like breaking the 180-degree rule is a big no-no in filmmaking. So whenever you have a camera on one side, right, we try to we kind of treat it like a play, right? So if this was a theater and this is the stage, we never take the camera on stage. We always kind of keep it on one side and try to stick to a side, unless we cut away, right? I cut away to the moon and it makes it a little different. Need to make sure all my goblins are alive and breathing. Up until the very end. Now, okay, there it goes. So since I had not set these clips to be a looping animation, that's why I had multiple of them pasted in here. But as soon as you you click on a clip, say, and you turn on loop time, right? Say that, especially for an idle animation, this is important. Turning on loop, that lets you just extend out that animation on the timeline ad nauseum, you know, as long as you want, so it can go all the way to the end, right, without having to copy paste all the new animations. So given how messy that that equip animation is, I might not use it on the Viking, not that I'm looking at it. It's a bit gross. So all of these activation tracks become a bit unnecessary, and rather I'll just delete the one on his back. Have him start the scene with the axe in hand. This one. Oh, interesting. No hand animation on this one. I might have downloaded this for the goblin characters who have no hands. They only have nubs. Not even a sock for little Dobby. Oh man, if these are Dobbies, then I should really chop a few up, right? Maybe some of them should get whacked in battle as the berserker goes a bit wild. Since this one is the offender, just go look for another idle animation for him. Make sure loop time is on for any idles, and then match the offsets. That's pretty nice. Now, here I've got an issue where, and I've noticed this on this animation before, here where the left hand does not make it to the weapon. Let's just nudge that into place. Also notice that for my weapon I have an object between the hand, or in this case the middle finger is what it attaches to, and the axe itself, right? That gives me like a pivot point to work with rather than the pivot of the axe. Oof, this hand is really going a little wacky here. So what I could do, I suppose, right, is look at this animation in the animation timeline. Edit an animation window. Could even see, where those keyframes are that affect that part, or where it looks a bit wacky. And then maybe expand this so I can see what's going on here. Left hand Q and left hand T. Interesting. That helped. Okay. So let's see if I move this. It is creating new keyframes. So what I really want to do though is, if there are existing keyframes, is I'd rather key on top of those. The other thing to keep in mind is that now I've changed this animation greatsword idle. So any other models, right, if I use the same animation on my troll character, he would also have these changes, whether that's good or bad, right? So sometimes you see in job listings, that they want somebody who can clean up mocap animation, and this is part of it, right? There's like you go frame by frame on your game character, and you fix any issues there and try to avoid it, like getting jerky movements, right? You want the movements to stay nice and smooth. So it's a tricky process, and this is why we typically animate in Maya with controllers and not directly on the model like this. Oof, this is another. So there's really 3 values here, right, that I have to worry about, at least 3, maybe more, to get the hand actually where it needs to go. Might be as close as we can get it. But the issue being, right, having perfected 1, now it breaks immediately. So often, right, we're going to do this animation rather in Maya, where we can have our controls on it, and especially using the Mixamo plugin there rather than just doing this freehand on the bones. We want to have an IK controller on the hand, and there are tutorials that you can find for how to set up a two-handed sword in Maya, so that the hands will always stay on the grip of the sword. Now, if I'm in a rush / I'm being lazy, or I don't have the kind of time to dedicate to that project, or if it's not a well paid enough project that I want to put that kind of time in there, rather just change the camera angle and cut the hands out, or use a different animation, right? Like find a workaround rather than dealing with the issues. Now I'm also noticing that these palm trees feel bit out of place on the seriousness of this scene, right? Going a bit edgelord. So where is there's my tree painting. Shift click to delete any trees. So I'll just stick with grass on this particular terrain. So I just clicked on the little flowers here. I told it that I want to edit details, add grass texture. Right, detail texture is the alpha channel, right, of the grass all close up. So just like when we made leaves, right, you can just make a small alpha channel there. And then it'll ask you to change the size, or the size, the shape, and the colors. So on this one, right, I've already added the grass frond, and I've started to mess with the settings here, right? If I want them to all kind of face the camera always, you can use billboard. If you got camera motion, that can look weird, but these can also look distracting, so it's kind of like pick your poison. Here as well, it's like, do you want long grass, do you want short grass? The nice thing being that you can edit these values after the fact, including the color and so on. So now if I add a wind zone, it's going to show me the gizmo. Okay, the wind is blowing inwards. I think that matches my fog, so let's see. The fog. Oh, the wind is really going at it, so I'll probably have to lower the wind zone properties, right? I feel like the wind looks nice on the trees, but maybe not so much on the grass. So again, it's one of those things where you want to dial it back to where you're not noticing it. You know, as soon as it becomes obvious that you've done something there, it means that you probably want to turn it down a little bit. So again, timing and stuff is a little bit off in these. I think the wind is just working against me too much, so I'll get rid of that. So yeah, I'm gonna end there, go find a music track, right, and then I can come back and add another track down here, which will just be an audio track. Alright guys, so I'm actually at a pretty good spot here as far as having a lot on my timeline and being able to play it back right inside of Unity. It's a good time to export everything just to get a feel for how it actually plays out, right? You want to kind of get completely out of the editor so that you're not thinking too much about what you can change at that specific moment compared to, you know, making notes as to what actually stands out as the major issues that you need to fix, right? So better to concentrate on the big issues than be tackling small little ones all the time that maybe don't have much of a difference, don't make much of a visual difference, right? So also make sure that you're viewing in your game editor. I haven't mentioned this before, but we've talked about it last semester. that you've set your editor game editor window resolution, or at least your aspect ratio to 16:9. That's what we're going to be rendering at, right? That's the aspect ratio of these monitors, 1080p. I like to use the new capture tool from Unity. So if I go to my assets or the Unity assets, let's see where it shows up. Unity registry. Did it not capture? Recorder. Right, so Unity Recorder. I install this package. And that way I can get a perfect frame by frame render at a good resolution, right, without any frame drops when I preview it back, so that I'm not seeing any slowdowns, right, caused by running the editor. And right now I've got Maya and Photoshop and everything else running as well. So once I have it installed, I don't need anything in my scene now. I just need to go to the actual capture. So it's under, where do they hide it? General, recorder window. Right, I can just use the quick recorder, but it's worth diving in here just to check the settings. Exit play mode when you're done. Okay, so I hit add recorder and I want to output to a movie. Right, sometimes when we're gonna bring this into something like Premiere or into After Effects, we rather output as an image sequence and then we render the images together later. I'm not sure what the animation clip outputs has. That's something I've used. So other settings here, by default H.264 is good. This is what YouTube uses for its encoding. It's going to ask me where I want to save it. I don't really want to put it inside my game project. I would rather pop it somewhere outside of this so that I can kind of control how big my my project folder is getting. Yeah. So I'll pop it into a capture folder. Take number 1. It's going to ask me what I want to call it. We call it Control-V Viking. It's mine. Plus wildcards is the take, right? I can change it to the time or the date or anything like that. The nice thing here is I want to keep the playback at a solid 30 FPS. What it's going to do now is it will warm up the renderer, right, the game window. It's going to play back my project and make sure that even if there are slowdowns for areas where I have lots of effects or something, that it still renders every single frame, right? Every frame is going to be processed and I won't get any choppy bits when I play it back through the capture window. There we have my little guys running towards me. And it looks like I needed to actually cancel out of that. I'm not sure why I wanted to keep going. I can also set the time interval or the frame interval, right? If I know how long it is, say I know it's 25 seconds long, right? So what you guys would do is just hit 25 seconds rather than have to remember to pause it, right? But that should give me a nice MP4 file. It is also teeny tiny, 27 megs because of the 264 encoder. You can see that it's got the frame grid on here. That's not good. Let's get rid of that. Right, so now Obviously these technical gizmos and things are a problem. I don't know why it would render all that crap. Game window guides. Okay. So now it's increased to take 2. If I want, now I've changed the start and end time, right? So I don't have to worry about it ending. I do have an issue there. A lack of animation there. Bit of animation missing on the clouds. Right, and I can kind of jot down notes as to what is actually wrong with it as I'm watching it. But I feel like full screen gives you that much better of an idea, right, of what parts are missing or what parts feel like they're holding it back from being complete. One thing I'm noticing is the lack of shadows anywhere. I don't have any contact shadows. Probably when I deleted my directional light way back when. Textures are looking fine on the characters. I'm glad I don't have to worry about that. Everything looking okay here for the most part. The fog is no longer too trippy, but now I don't like this, the waviness of the landscape, right? So this is a good time when you're out of the editor, even if it's just for a minute, to swap to like taking some notes on some flashcards or, you know, like a sticky pad or on your phone even, just to give yourself a checklist of things to do before you would call it complete, you know, at this level. So that'll give me like 5 or 6 things to concentrate on, and it also just kind of gets my head out of this like, ooh, and then I'm going to change this slider, I'm going to change this value, I want to add this, I want to add that, right? The stuff, the time spent inside the editor, it's often filled with like feature creep. You're like, oh, I want to have a mission on my moon, and I want to have a texture, and I want to have, you know, I've been like, made a whole new texture for a goblin character, and then I was like, well, the model isn't interesting enough, so I went and updated the model, and then I had to make a new texture. Right, I had to make a emission texture because I wanted the eyeballs to glow, and then I was like, I also want the eyeball to glow on my troll character. Right, so you get carried away a bit with feature creep if you're just inside the editor, because there are all these little things that feel rewarding, but aren't going to have as big of an impact on the final product as you think they will, right? So it's good to kind of take a step back and go into render mode and just take a look at your actual render. That will help you catch the things that, you know, are actually working against you on camera, not just in your scene, right? Because the scene tells one story, but when we have it all cut together with camera angles and things, right, it tells a slightly different story, and it highlights, you know, different kinds of problems that you might need to consider changing up camera angles and things to hide, right? So if I'm getting this crazy neck intersection here, it's probably also a good idea, like I did in the last video where I messed with the jumping, right, to fix the head position on the jump. I can probably do the same thing to fix the neck position on this particular animation, or I'm gonna have to go all the way back to Maya and figure out what was going on with his skin weights and things. This isn't the same. So again, nailing down which problems are actually bigger problems is important at this stage. Also helps me realize, you know, that I'm missing an asset here. I need a boat, so I'm going to have to do a quick speed model of a boat. I don't know if I have one anywhere. So that is one of the last pieces of the puzzle here. But I did want to show you guys the recorder window for capturing, because it is it is a handy built-in tool where you don't have to go to an external app to finish that.